name is Morey. I'm the AVP of Innovation Strategy at Frog. It's a great pleasure to be with you today with so many peers and colleagues from the industry. I wanted to share some of the work, some of the thinking, some of the experiments we've been doing around the topic of sensing. Sensing is impacting not just the products and services we design, but the process by which we design them, how we go about building them. Before I go there, though, I wanted to start here with the Human Dynamics Lab at MIT. You may have read about this. They've designed a badge that employees wear as they navigate their way around the company. And this measures the formal and informal conversations that people have. So things like the tone of voice, the duration of the conversation, the degree to which people exhibit empathy, whether you talk or interrupt or listen, around 100 data points per minute. And the purpose of this was to see if they could understand the characteristics that distinguish successful teams from unsuccessful ones. They found they could, but more interesting, they uncovered what they call the digital signature of natural leaders. It turns out these are people who circulate around the company actively, they give of their time democratically to their colleagues, and they engage in brief but energetic conversations. Now imagine in your company, if you had that data, how that might change how you manage, how you promote, how you hire. And I start with this because it's indicative of the type of data or data stream that's coming our way as product builders, product designers. As we take that data and change how we interact with the world, it's almost like dealing with a new material. I think of it as designing with data. Now, we've been talking about the Internet of Things for a few years now, but it's only recently that the so-called physical graph has started to take shape before our eyes. What I mean by this is the digital manifestation of the physical world around us. So how did this happen? Well, it happened because of the natural convergence of technologies. Intelligence is seeping into the products and services we're designing and the environments that we're putting them in. And of course, the expanding internet is connecting billions of these devices to each other and to us. What's new in all this, though, is adding a layer of sensors onto this. Now, the notion of connecting up everyday objects with sensors and then connecting them to the web is, of course, not new. But I think the recent news or announcement that Google's planning to acquire Nest has elevated this and raised it in consumer consciousness. It's taken it onto the front pages and moved this from being the next new thing to the next big thing. And of course, the role of sensors has had a pretty big impact on us at Frog as we build products and services. We're actively making things with sensors in them that adapt to the environment around them. And not just obvious things like smartphones or consumer electronics, but things like this, a wearable device which identifies you to the environment around you and then tailors that environment to you. Things like a mask which samples the air and reports on air quality. An entire logistics and tracking system which doesn't just track the package as it makes its way around the world, but also monitors the condition of that package. Clean water ATMs in rural India that report on the status of their filter. And most recently, right here in San Francisco, a Goodwill bin that reports when it's full so that it can be emptied. We've been putting radios in pretty much everything and then putting sensors around that so it can sample or sip the environment around it, creating what I think of as a data layer onto the world. Chris Moon sums it up well when he says, most of us don't realize just how far the Internet of Things will go, from souped up gadgets that track our every move, to a world that predicts our actions and emotions. In this way, the Internet of Things will become more central to society than the Internet as we know it today. Now, beneath all this heady talk, though, lies the reality of where we are today, which is balkanized technologies and these islands of devices that don't communicate to each other. And at Frog, we've been thinking about this using a metaphor of an iceberg. So above the iceberg is that visible part. That's the physical product or the user interface. But beneath the water is where the great bulk of the iceberg is, and that's where the magic happens, right? That's where the sense data is turned into something that we can use in products and services, turned into something that's interesting. And most people think of this as a data science or a engineering challenge or magic. But what we're finding is that to do this well, it takes designers as well. Let me go back to that Airwaves mask example. This is a concept from two of my colleagues in the Shanghai studio in Frog, where, of course, air quality is on everybody's mind. And this works as a mask, so it protects the wearer, filters out air. But the real value in this product lies in the particle sensor that's inside the mask, which then communicates with the smartphone using Bluetooth, overlays the user's location, and then shares that information with other people, other users of the product. And so we're seeing that the value has migrated from the visible part of this product, the mask itself, to the invisible, to the IT infrastructure, and to the analytics that support it. And we see this happening time and time and time again as we build these connected sensing devices. In fact, a former colleague of mine used to joke that if this value migration continues, pretty much the output of our design will be a beautiful algorithm that we can give to our clients in an attractive box. As we gather up more and more of this data, it's creating what one of my colleagues describes as a sensorscape. And of course, the ability to manage all that data and harness it, turn it into something useful, is a formidable problem and a growing problem. And yes, of course, it's an engineering problem, but also a design problem. And we learned this the hard way from building particularly health and wellness devices and home energy management systems, where the natural form of data, what it spits out is charts and tables and graphs. And for most users of a product, that's pretty useless. We need to humanize the output, turn it into something that gives people clear direction, that motivates them to change their behavior. That's more actionable. And of course, that translation I'm describing is a design challenge. It turns out the bottom of that iceberg needs designers more than ever. Now, as we were building these connected sensing products and services, it wasn't lost on us that it might be quite handy to leverage some of this data in the actual process of designing and building these products. At Frog, a big part of our process is gathering insights. Doing what we do, building new things, is not easy. The obvious, the answers are hard to find. And so we find that insights process of using qualitative and quantitative research to understand people can give us an edge. And we really see sensing as part of that continuum of tools and techniques that we use in order to get that edge. We try to uncover some truth about the world that had gone unnoticed before. So let me give you an example. The connected fridge is one of those ideas that's been doing the rounds since the early days of the internet. I suspect some of you have worked on this or written the RFQs for this. And I think we've pretty much proven as a collective group that the answer is not likely to be the RFID tag sort of fueled fantasy of milk that orders itself. Neither is the answer to slap an iPad on the front of a refrigerator and get the contents to self-organize into a recipe. But there's something in this idea that keeps us coming back to it. And when faced with a challenge like this at Frog, our instinct or our approach is to go and see what we can learn about our users by doing contextual inquiries or interviews. In this project, though, we wondered if we could find out something more if we went directly to the source and use sensors to gather data about how people use the product. And so the sensor we used was an Android device, which we put inside the refrigerator. When somebody opened the door to get something out, the ambient light sensor in the device would trigger a video recording, and we would put a question on the front of the screen. And we recorded these videos. When you closed the door, the recording would stop, and it would get uploaded to a server. And we could kind of get what I think of as a longitudinal view of how people are using the product. We learned a lot of things from doing this. One of the interesting findings was that how people think they use a product and how they actually use it was quite different. But whatever the source of the input, there's that moment in the design process where you gather up all this information, all these insights that you've learned, you reflect on them deeply, and then you turn that into ideas, into concepts, into products. And that moment, that reflection, that's a profoundly human moment. It's laden with cultural nuances and understanding. You bring everything to bear as a product builder, as a product designer onto that. And sensing data is no different. Even though the format of the data and the inputs might be universal, making sense of that and turning it into something useful is profoundly local. Product strategy, product design is a craft. We tend to learn by doing rather than by reading or by studying. And in order to promote that doing at Frog, we've sent each of our studios a sensor toy chest containing a kit of sensors so that we can, our strategists, our technologists, our designers can play and experiment and learn what kind of data they can get, how they can use this. What inspired this was the experience of our Shanghai studio, who late last summer got together to understand what they could find out about themselves and their environment if they wired up their studio and then published that data publicly in a so-called studio API. So what is a studio API? Well, we began by looking at all the types of sensors we could use in our environment. Things like temperature sensors, cameras to detect motion and to count people. We looked at power and water usage. We even looked for ways to measure our trash output. And the idea there was, what could we learn about ourselves if we made this available to everybody in the studio and outside as an API? Would it change our behavior? Would it change how we work and live? But with air pollution on people's minds in the summer of Shanghai summers, that quickly became the focus. And we bought a semi-professional particle counter, which we hooked up to a laptop, and we could sample the air every minute so that we could get a sense of the quality of the air both inside the studio and outside. And what we found surprised us. It turned out the air quality in our studio was often as bad as the air outside. We've been focused on the wrong problem, or at least on the wrong part of the problem. We've developed these workarounds and solutions for our commute, and it turns out that the place where we spend the bulk of our day is as bad as outside. It's changed our behavior somewhat. We now walk around our project rooms with air filters. So where are we going with all this? Well, there's going to be a lot of technological developments and changes, working on that interoperability and standardization and openness. But I don't think that will impact us directly as product builders and designers. What will impact us, and in a big way, are the human factor issues. And so, first and foremost, we have to build products and tools that are powerful without being too complex, that are easy to understand for people to be able to use them. I think Douglas Adams puts it nicely when he says a common mistake that people make when trying to design something completely foolproof is to underestimate the ingenuity of complete fools. And I don't mean to tease our users here, but we're asking a lot from them. Right? This is challenging stuff. This is a new paradigms that we're hoping to get them to understand. Second, we have to design with privacy and transparency in mind. In a study that I'll be publishing in the next, 4 to 5 weeks, which we conducted in 5 countries around the world, we find consumers to be in a state of cognitive dissonance about this. On the one hand, the convenience of personal computing continues to trump privacy, and yet a whopping 97% of people we spoke to or we surveyed harbor concerns that their data is going to be misused. So, we've been pretty thoughtless about how we design these products today. We're planting the seeds of a privacy backlash. I think to build successful products in the future, we have to become a lot more careful about how we use personal data. Now, it's been noted or commented that we're in the midst of this great infrastructure build-out, transition, which in some ways is comparable to what's gone before. I'm thinking, railroads or telecommunications. But unlike those that have gone before, this one is intensely personal. It pervades every aspect of our private lives. And you probably don't think of your kitchen countertop as being infrastructure, but it's been imagined that once all these ordinary everyday objects in our life can both sense and respond, and for the most part are controlled by computers, the world becomes something like a living thing, a living organism. Jeff Higgins, who's the CTO of our friends over at SmartThings, puts it this way: we believe the digital and physical worlds are merging, and that done correctly, what this will do is create a virtual representation of our physical devices or physical world online. What that will accomplish is it makes the physical world programmable. When we change the digital representation, the physical world will change in response. Now, I think that sounds awesome, that sounds amazing, that sounds exciting. So long as we remember to put designers in the front and center of this movement, of this transition, in order to humanize it. This build-out, as I said, is intensely personal and pervades people's everyday lives. So I think as designers and as product builders, it's incumbent upon us to learn this technology, consider its implications, own this, and make this as much a design-shaped challenge as it is an engineering and data science challenge. Thank you.